If you've ever opened your laptop and been greeted by a wall of unread email threads, pings, and meeting invites, you're not alone. The average employee now switches screens or platforms almost 80 times a day. What once felt like staying connected has turned into a full-time job of managing communication itself. Cal Newport is all too familiar with this constant battle. Newport is a professor of computer science at Georgetown University. He's also the author of the book A World Without Email: Reimagining Work in an Age of Communication Overload. For many of us, email feels like an annoying yet unavoidable part of work. But Newport takes it one step further. She says it fuels burnout and lowers productivity by constantly pulling focus away from the actually important tasks.
The main issue is that it forces us to constantly tend these conversations. It's why today, at least in one study, the average American knowledge worker is going to check an inbox once every 6 minutes. It's because if you have 3 or 4 dozen ongoing asynchronous back and forth discussions happening via email, you have to keep checking that inbox, because if you don't, things are going to slow down, things are going to get missed, people are going to have to wait for you. This constant checking is the real villain if we want to look at productivity, especially in the early 21st century, is because to check this inbox all the time requires you to shift your context. So you're writing a memo, and then you change your attention to an inbox because you have to tend these hyperactive hive mind back and forth conversations. And that's going to trigger a complex and time-consuming neurochemical cascade to try to shift your attention to the context of that inbox. But what we do is we then rip our attention back to the main thing we're doing before that cascade finishes, and it all gets jumbled. And the effect is we can't think clearly, and we feel fatigued, and we feel stressed and anxious.
Before email, there were few digital distractions. People relied on scheduled in-person meetings or conference room phone calls to work through issues. But once email took over, it became a crutch.
Email spread very rapidly in the first half of the 1990s, and the main goal it was accomplishing was replacing fax machines, voicemails, and memos, inter-office memos. Email could implement these things much more cheaply and much faster. So it was seen as a bit of a productivity silver bullet when it came around, which is why it had such a rapid rise once that tech became available. And what you see is by 1995, this had gone from a niche product to a $500 million a year industry. So once the major office productivity players of that time, like Lotus and Microsoft, got involved in pushing out these products, it really helped it spread because there was trusted companies producing slick server software, and we were off to the races when it came to email communication.
And today it isn't just email. There's Slack, Teams, Zoom, and AI-powered collaboration tools that promise to help, but often add new layers of distractions. For many office roles, the pandemic's remote work shift has hardened into permanent hybrid models, and the boundaries between at work and off work are thinner than ever. A Gallup poll published in 2024 found that nearly 60% of remote or hybrid workers feel pressure to respond immediately to digital messages, even if it's outside business hours.
We're tasked with getting hard things done with our brain, and at the same time put into an environment where we have to check an inbox once every 6 minutes. It's a torturous setup in which we're making our work impossible to do or impossible to do well. It makes people anxious. It makes people less happy. It leads to more burnout. It leads to more turnover. It pushes people out of the workflow, or the workforce, I should say. And this style of work also creates unexpected inequities, because when all we do is check inboxes during the day, we have to try to find time in the morning and the evening to actually use our brain and get things done. But access to that time is not fairly distributed. I mean, if you have kids or not makes a difference. If you're taking care of an aged relative after work or not makes a difference. And so there's a lot of issues with saying, here's the way we're going to work. Just constantly be a part of all these digital chatter. Just constantly be a part of all this back and forth. It's causing way more trouble than I think we realize.
In response, some organizations are rewriting their playbooks by setting quiet hours during each workday, banning internal emails after 6 p.m., or using AI to automatically summarize and shorten long email threads. France, Germany, and now California have also introduced right to disconnect legislation, giving employees the legal right to log off after work hours. But long before these policies and other tech-driven tools, Newport explains how some industries tackled this overload.
Let's say you are dealing with customer service or something like this. You might be concerned if it's just better to be very accessible, because being accessible and answering questions is what I do. But even in these type of industries, we often see there's a confusion between accessibility and clarity. We think what people need is constant access to us at all times, but really what they need is just clarity about if I have an issue, I know exactly how I'm going to get that resolved. We saw this with the IT industry about 15, 20 years ago when they shifted over to a ticketing model. They realized that just letting people call them or email them when they had an issue with their computers in their organization would quickly spiral out of control. So they built these ticketing systems where you get a ticket, we're working on it, you get automatic updates, but it allowed the IT professionals to just work on one thing at a time and let the system keep track of here's what's being done, here's its status. They can take a ticket, work on it, then update the ticket in the system. People were largely fine with that because they had clarity. Oh, here's the ticket, here's my number, I'm getting updates, I know this is being handled. So it's okay that I can't just pick up the phone necessarily and get one of the people on the line right away. So reactive industries feel sometimes like it's better just to be fully accessible, but even there, if there's clarity for the people who are trying to contact you, that's often sufficient.
And that same idea applies far beyond customer service. Newport says try working with your team to set a few ground rules to find this clarity. Decide when you'll check messages, when you're offline, and how to flag if something's urgent. Once everyone's on the same page, the constant interruptions start to fade and real focus becomes possible again. He also recommends this backup plan.
If something goes wrong we weren't expecting, we have a fallback. So like nothing too bad can happen. We all get on the phone, we have a number, whatever, so that no one is too stressed about it.
Once these internal channels are set and working well, it's time to think about how to improve communication with external-facing partners like outside clients.
Once a team has worked out how they want to collaborate internally, they can also work out their interface to other teams. So, okay, if you want to send us new requests for work we have to do, that's great, but here's how we do it. Put the description in this Dropbox and send us a note. We check the Dropbox twice a week, etc. Right? So teams can figure out their own internal processes and then figure out how the outside world can actually interface with them. Interestingly enough, I did some research on the Apollo program. I was wondering, how did we send a man to the moon before we had email? That's largely how they did it. We broke things up into teams. Teams had their own internal processes, and then mimicking the electronic communication systems they were building for the Apollo spacecraft, the teams would have these clearly defined interface protocols of this is how other teams can talk to us. And I love that example. That was a really interesting example of when you don't have tools like email, you can still collaborate. You just have to think a little bit harder about how you do it.
So, whether you're trying to send a team to the moon or just trying to finish a client project before the deadline, how and when you communicate is key. While emailing and online chatting can make us feel like we're saving time, it's often not the most efficient route. The real measure of progress in today's digital age may be how much focus and peace we can actually get back during our busy work weeks. To find out more about this topic and our guest, Cal Newport, head to viewpointsradio.org. You can check out his book, A World Without Email, Reimagining Work in an Age of Communication Overload, online and in select bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Instagram, X, and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zuveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price.